to the show. I am live on the internet. My name is Bret, and you are watching me currently in one of four places. Today, we're joined by special guests from Docker and the Docker Captains team. I am streaming live from my little mini studio here in Virginia, and we are actually live on Facebook, on both Docker's channel and my channel, and then on YouTube on my channel or Docker's channel. So depending on where you're at, you're watching us in one of four places. And that's super great because we want to reach as many people as we can today because we're talking about Docker's new release 1903, which is the first big release of the year. And there's so much stuff to talk about that we had to turn it into 3 days of shows. In case you've not watched my show before, this is something that I do every week, normally on Thursdays. But this week is special because we are talking about all the new stuff in Docker Desktop and the Docker engine and the client and all that stuff. So I've got two great guests today. Let me bring them into the show. So let's start from the left. Over on the left here, I have Sujay. He's a cloud engineer, a Docker captain, and currently streaming from Malaysia and is the community leader of Docker Penang and the meetup group there. And you can see his little Twitter handle down there at the bottom. You can reach out to him later. Hello, Sujay.
Hey.
And there in the middle, we've got Ben from Docker. He's the Docker Desktop product manager and is also a gym fanatic. Hello, Ben.
Hey guys.
All right, so the rules for today are we're going to be demoing and talking about all this cool stuff in Docker throughout the hour, possibly even more than an hour if we keep talking about it, which we could talk about this all day. And your job is to give us questions about the 1903 release. So normally, if you've joined this show with me every week, we're taking questions on all things Docker, Kubernetes, containers, you name it. But today and this week, we're going to be focusing on the new features of Docker Desktop, Docker Engine, Docker Command Line, all that stuff. So we're going to be looking through the questions throughout the show, so you can go ahead and get your questions in early. We sort of go from a top-down approach. Of course, Sujay and Ben can pick out any questions they want at any time to answer them. That because they're the guests, they get that privilege. And that's the rules. And then this will always be available on Docker's channel as well as mine for watching later in case you're watching this and it's not live. And if you saw the beginning was giving you the intro and telling you all about the different stuff that we're talking about today and tomorrow and Thursday. So make sure you join us tomorrow and the day after. But first up, we've got Sujay here. You've seen him on the show before. He was actually here a couple months ago. And he's going to be talking about BuildX, which is a really exciting new toolkit, and take it away.
Thanks, Bret. So as we know, we have 1903 release happened like last week, and there was a cool feature which was announced during DockerCon. Docker had extended their support for ARM architecture. And soon after the DockerCon, we as a Docker captain, got access to the Docker beta version, the 1903 release. And the first thing I tested about was BuildX feature. So the BuildX is actually a Docker CLI plugin, which extends the Docker build command and provides you some extra features, which are basically provided by the Moby Build Kit project, which is a new builder mechanism coming up in Docker. So it provides you some cool new features like you can carry out your build on multi-nodes, different hosts. It also provides new build functionality like cache mechanism, which is a build kit feature. So basically, I'm going to demo something around it. Let me share my screen for it. And start sharing.
All right. You can see your screen.
Okay. Yeah. Do you see my terminal?
Yep.
Okay. And let me switch. Okay. So let's start with a sample Go program. Let's say release party. Let's go. And so basically what I'm trying to do is type a basic hello world kind of program in Go. I have kind of a template written for it. And if you see, I'm just printing my host name, my kind of architecture, what I'm running on, and the OS which is used. So so I'm basically going through the way which we carry out our development in a Docker environment. So I have my code written, and I do go build release RT. So that's compiled, and I have a binary. So basically, when I executed that binary, it prints my host name and the OS type and the architecture what I'm using. So basically, I had gone through my development cycle, and now it's the time to write a Docker file. So let's type a Docker file for it. And if I do, I have a template created for it. So basically, I'm using again a multi-stage build where I'm using Golang image as a parent image, copying my code into it, building, and then in the second stage using a Scratch as the parent image, base image, and then that's it. So in a normal Docker world, you would do Docker build -d, which is tagging my image, and that's the test. So if you see, so I had done already a build of this same code earlier, so that's everything is cached, and you see the build happening in a fast way. And if I execute Docker run, Sujay Pillai /test. So that piece of code which I had on my machine is Dockerized now. I have a Docker image, and when I execute that Docker image, it's basically printing my container ID, which is the host name. It's running in a Linux container and AMD64. So that was basically the way which we lived our life in the Docker earlier, before 1903 release. So now, if in the same earlier version, if I had to build the same code for a different architecture, let's say I had to run the code on Raspberry Pi, I would have to prepare a manifest file for it, add my Docker images to the manifest list, and push that to Docker Hub. All I have to do is everything manually. So that's where one of the cool feature of BuildX is. It helps you to build Docker images for multi-platform as well as multi-architecture. So let me show you that piece, how it works. So basically, when you have 1903 release installed on your machine, so I have an enterprise edition running on my machine right now, and by default, it comes with BuildX installed in it. If you are on a community engine, you would have the same BuildX CLI plugin available if you are on the Edge release. And if you are still on a stable release of 1903, the best way to get is there is a GitHub project for BuildX. Go to the releases page. You can download the binary for it, and just what you need to do is that just copy it under your default Docker directory, config directory, which is under .docker. Docker. Yeah, CLI plugins. So if you see, I have by default Docker app and Docker BuildX as CLI plugins. So if you are on a stable release, you would have to manually do that. So let me show you how I can build a image which would be for multi-architecture.
By the way, I just want to mention, you're talking about mentioning the plugins. For those of you who haven't heard about the new plugin model in the Docker command line, we'll be talking more about that throughout the week, and we'll actually be Michael Irwin and others on Thursday will actually be focused on how to build plugins and make your own custom stuff. So.
Okay. Yep. So BuildX has a command called build, which is kind of the same functionality which you use to have like Docker build. All you need to Docker driver. So this is something which, so I will explain you why it didn't work. So if you see on my machine, when I have a Docker BuildX listing, there is a default builder available, which uses the Docker driver. So by default, the Docker driver uses an embedded library in Docker G, which has a storage mechanism called Moby storage, which doesn't support right now multi-platform builds. So what you need to do is that you need to create a new builder, which you can do something like this. So what I did is executed the command docker buildx create. I'm using a new driver type called Docker container and giving my builder a name DCK builder. So if I do Docker buildx ls now, I have a new Docker builder in my list. The beauty of this thing is that the whole Docker build kit project runs itself as a backend Docker container. So if on my machine, if you see right now, I don't have any Docker containers running. But if I start using this one, the Docker builder, let's switch to this builder, Docker buildx use DCK builder. So if you see right now, it's pointing to this one. And if I execute the same Docker BuildX command again, it started building the Docker images. So what's happening right now is it's building Docker images for Linux ARM64, Linux AMD 64, Linux ARM64, and ARM v7 version of it. So all it's doing is that it's building those three images simultaneously. That's kind of a parallel build happening on your machine right now. And if you wanted, you can point all these three builds to be executing on a remote node also. All you need to do is that add a new builder, which would point to remote node. So once that build happens, there is a way to directly push the images to Docker Hub also. Right now, my command didn't do that. It's just building the images.
So what you just did there, let me make sure I understand. You ran a single command line that is simultaneously building the same app across different architectures and in parallel, right? And if you wanted, those machines building could be remote Docker engines, not just your local machine, right? And then you were mentioning that you could also have that one-liner do a push at the end of it to a registry, assuming they're successful in building. That's a lot. That's a lot for one-liner.
Yes, and in on top of that, when all the three images are built, it would create a manifest file for you, and it's also pushed along that Docker image push onto the Docker Hub.
Yeah, because that was a tricky part too. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize that manifest files exist or what their use is. Could you just mention that? What those are for?
So the Docker manifest is basically a bill of material for your Docker images, which says that my Docker images has support for this basic architecture or platform. It can run on. So basically, when you pull a Alpine image, let's say on a Raspberry Pi, it goes and pulls down the specific image which can be run on ARM architecture. So all those things kind of information is stored in the manifest file for you. I'll show you once this build gets completed. That's kind of one of the new features for BuildX. So the difference, so when I said that it runs in a Docker container, let me show you what happens.
So for those that, oh, sorry, I was going to say, just for those that are watching that have maybe seen one of our previous videos or one of previous post on BuildKit, this is running BuildKit in the background for you, but the command line has changed. So essentially, you don't need to set an environment variable anymore. You're using this new
Yeah.
BuildX command line to do that. And then it has a whole bunch of extra features that you're showing, yeah.
Yeah. So the whole build is like happening within a container using this one. So your whole build kit thing is running in a container over here. Okay, so
Pretty
it
cool.
built my images and I didn't pass the push thing. So let me do this thing once again. So if you see at the end, it's exporting manifest list. So it created the manifest list and it's pushing the manifest list on the Docker Hub. And so one cool new feature with Docker and desktop, at least for enterprise thing, is you can list down your repositories within this. It takes time. Let me switch to this one for now. So if I do a refresh, you should see the image coming up over here. And if you see, it built an image which has an support for ARM on 64 and AMD 64 architectures. So that was about BuildX. So basically, we covered kind of all these commands. And let me show you this one. So Docker, BuildX, image tools. So this is kind of the Docker manifest command what we had earlier. It helps you to inspect your Docker image directly pointing to a remote registry. So right now I'm using release party multi-arc. Sorry, I missed. So this is kind of the same command which we used to have for Docker manifest. So it's actually listing down your images which were pushed right now when I did that build. So basically you are having an image for release party which is tagged as multi-arc and it has 3 different platform support. So these are all the information which goes into your manifest files.
Yeah, and for those of you that are really just users of Docker and you're not maybe releasing a whole bunch of multi-arch images, the way that this all sort of gets exposed to the consumer, I guess we'll call him a Docker consumer, is if when you type Docker run Python on Mac, on a Docker desktop on Mac, and you run Docker run Python on a Raspberry Pi or a mainframe or whatever the architectures are for a particular image, for that example there, for that Python image, this manifest file in Docker figure it all out for you and go, oh, you're running on this architecture. Let me go find that copy of the image, that tagged copy of the image, so that you don't have to specify manually which architecture you're on. Docker kind of already knows that. And so what Sujay is showing here is the other side of that coin, which is how do I create multi-architecture images without having to make a whole bunch of different tags or different repositories for those different images. If you've been around Docker long enough, years ago, that's what we kind of had to do. But nowadays, all of this automation and manifest stuff allows it to all be a sort of a seamless single. It looks like a single image in Docker Hub or in your registry, right?
Yep. And the one thing I loved is Docker BuildX has a command called bake. I have not exactly used it right now, but there is a good DockerCon video available. If you remember, there was an open source summit in during DockerCon, and Tony gave a good 1-hour talk around Docker build kit, and a portion of it contains an explanation for bake. I've still not used it, so I won't be the right person to explain it.
Cool.
So yeah, that was from my side, Brett.
All right. Pretty cool. The BuildX stuff is now considered release, right? This is official stable or
No, it's still experimental.
okay.
So we call it as opt-in.
So can you
The
show
Docker
again?
build it.
Sorry, I think in the beginning you
So
showed how to enable it, but can you, for those that missed it, including myself, can you show that again? So in other words, if you just are getting 1903 Docker Desktop this week because it's coming out and you should be getting the updates, what do you have to do to be able to use this?
So yeah, let me show. So if you are an enterprise customer or you're using Docker Desktop Community Edge release, it's by default ships with it. And if you are on a stable release now, what you need to do is that there is a GitHub project for BuildX, and it has releases happening monthly, I think so. All you need to do is download the release and copy it under the Docker config folder, which is under your home directory under this one.
All right. Do you talk about that in your blog post on this?
No, it's well documented in the GitHub for BuildX project.
Okay. All right, I'm going to post your link on BuildX.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for that. I'm very excited about BuildX as the sort of the next wave of building, because I think it addresses nearly every single thing that I've heard. Either I've had an issue with, or a limitation with, or I've seen people complain about, or wish that there was a feature in the Builder for. I see, we could talk all day about BuildX and all the build kit features and functionality out of it. But this is a really great intro to get you started. So Sujay's got a blog post that I just put up that you can check out, and you can just search for BuildX or BuildKit on the Googles, and you can find that. All right.
So it's under github.com/docker/BuildX.
All right. Oh, I posted it twice. Yes, BuildX. So BuildX is the command line in front of BuildKit. So if you want the latest stuff, definitely look up BuildX. All right, I'm not seeing any BuildX. Actually, wait, there might be one specific question in here about BuildX. BuildKit says the BuildX stuff is the same as the environment variable, just a newer version of that. Correct. Yeah. So when you used to set the BuildKit environment variable to enable it as the builder with the Docker build command, now you have a different complete command that has a whole bunch of extra functionality. So the old way of doing it, once you're on 1903 and you have the BuildX plugin, then the new way is to use the BuildX command. So yes, it supersedes that old environment variable. And I'm not seeing any other stuff. Okay, great. Thank you so much for the questions and the conversations. As always, we'll be continuing to look through that chat throughout the day. I'm paying a little bit more attention to the YouTube than the Facebook, but someone on Facebook did mention that it's hard to see the screen on Facebook. So I think Facebook, unfortunately, is limited to 720p streaming. So if it looks blurry on Facebook, jump over to YouTube. You can just go to youtube.com/dockerrun, and that will get you this in high resolution glory over there on the YouTubes. All right. Thank you so much. Next up, we've got Ben from Docker talking about, well, quite frankly, we could talk about stuff all day with all the new features of Docker Desktop and Docker Desktop Enterprise, which is a brand new product that Docker announced earlier this year at DockerCon. And actually, you might even announced it last year at DockerCon EU, right?
They did.
Yeah. So it's been anticipation has been building. So let's talk about it for a minute. What's the quick? Okay, so there's let me make sure I understand. There's a there's a free version we all know of Docker Desktop called Docker Desktop Community Edition. Is that right?
Yep, correct.
Yeah. And now there is a new product that is a superset of that called Docker Desktop Enterprise.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Give me the...
And not forgetting that you've got Edge and you've got Edge as well, which is your Docker Desktop with slightly more daily, well, not quite daily, we'll get there, with slightly more edgy features. You'll get things a little bit faster on Edge. So Docker Desktop Enterprise, the ask we had from a lot of our customers was, can we have a version of Docker Desktop that's supportable, and that we can deploy and have Docker sort of backing on using, and along with that, can you help us out with some of the common issues? The main one being that the community edition of Docker ships with the community engine, unsurprisingly. And was there an easy way to work with the enterprise engine? Along with that, we also looked at some of sort of the other main issues people had when trying to get Docker into the enterprise and used by people on their machines. And we looked at sort of addressing a few of those through the enterprise product. At the moment, it is sort of enterprise exclusive, getting that super set of features. We'll look at how we can get that out more widely as time goes on, as we'd like to find a way to get everyone access to some of these features.
Right. Cool. And I know that there's a laundry list of new things that are exclusive to Docker Desktop Enterprise. Can you pop quiz? Can you list them all?
I hope so. I can run through a few of them if that'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
So how squinty it'll be on my screen. Start sharing. So to kick off, a couple of them are going to be a bit of an eye test because I forgot to put on accessibility mode before we started. So in Docker Desktop Enterprise, as I was just mentioning, we had an ask of how could you support the enterprise engine on the desktop? And we didn't just want to ship just the enterprise engine on the desktop, as we know that not everyone's using the latest version of the enterprise engine. Some people want to use the same machine to move between community work and enterprise work. So we came up with the idea of version packs, where you can install more than one version of the Docker engine at a time. Currently, I've just got the 3.0 engine installed, but I could have the 2.0 engine or the community engine as well, and then I can use this menu to move between them. And that just restarts Docker and restarts that new engine with the containers that were sort of, or the images that was there waiting to be started. So that was one of the first features of Enterprise that we put in, was enabling people to move between those engine versions. The next, which was, again, kind of focused on that enterprise use case, was most people, when they're using Docker, they can change any of the settings they want. You can change your memory, your CPUs, your swap, proxies, your daemon. We added an administrator settings file, which, as long as it's deployed to somewhere that people can't access, which is kind of a given, you can actually lock what people can change. So, oops. So, I can't remember if it picks it up live. So I can now no longer change the number of CPUs that I'm using on my machine. The idea being that if you're deploying this across loads and loads of machines in enterprise, you might have some restrictions. You might want it to be more supportable. You might want to know it's in a known configuration, so it's easy for your support staff to debug. We want to support that for people to lock this down if they want to, as an enterprise feature set. So that's the second one. And on the same vein, this is the first time we've had Docker Desktop for Mac as a PKG and Docker Desktop for Windows as an NSI, which are kind of more standard packaging formats when you're deploying those across an enterprise estate. Oh, I should mention the version packs also include different versions of Kubernetes as well, or they can do. They also bundle up the CLI plugins as well. So those plugins you mentioned earlier, longer term we'll look to see what we can do to do some different bundling with the version packs with different plugins. It's one of the flashiest features, one of the most in-your-face features of Enterprise was Application Designer. Now, this came from feedback we'd had that getting started with Docker, getting started with new projects with Docker, knowing how to particularly get started with Compose and then Docker app as well, wasn't necessarily the easiest thing. We wanted to find a way to help people bootstrap new projects. So we came up with the idea of having pre-configured templates, where a template included both images and source code, that people could design templates themselves in an enterprise, so that as an enterprise you could set up your sort of set of best practice projects for your business to use, and then your team, if they want to start a new project, they'd be guided to start in a certain way. So when they come through, you could say, maybe we're going to support only JDK 9 and 10, but we are going to use Spring, we are going to use React, but only Node 10. And then as an organization, you can kind of build these templates, get people going in a particular direction, or you can just provide sort of the services and the versions that you want, and people can string them together in sort of a way that more suits their workflow, if you want to give people more flexibility in that. And then as they go through, you create that app, a better name. And I'm scaffolding the app here, what it's doing. Hopefully it won't show too much red text. Is it's bringing down and copying a load of those artifacts onto my local machine. When I hit run, that's actually going to start up the app. It's going to start up each of those containers. And then I can open the project in Visual Studio Code. And I can see what it's brought down on my local machine as part of that. So I've got my database, my secrets, I've got my back end, I've got my front end, I've got my Compose file, I've got my Docker app, and all of that has been pre-scaffolded and created for me. Hopefully that will finish starting soon. So that will depend on my network. I probably should have pulled this image before I started. Standard demo got issues. But this will also give you sort of, it's one of the first new places we're putting, looking at putting some of that running status back into the Docker UI to have a status of seeing what's running and what's not. So I don't know if I've actually got nothing running at the moment. Yeah, who's running? Test one. So if we jump back, have a look at test. No, test is stopped. There you go. Should have prepped it better. So the application designer, the idea is that we're really trying to make it easy for people to get started. There is documentation online to create your own application templates. It's not too bad. You need a service container image, so the source that goes with it, and then you edit a YAML file in the back end of Docker configuration, which points to sort of your new repository or new area of application templates, and those are then all picked up in the UI. And yeah, hopefully that will make it easier for people to get started, for newer users to get started bootstrapping those initial projects with Docker.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about some of these enterprise features, but because I think Docker last year, was a year ago maybe, on stage was talking about reaching the next 16 million developers. I think there was like some statistic about that, right? That there's at least that many that don't have Docker, and the idea here is once you start digging into these templates and into application designer, you start to see a lot of power around. If you've ever had to work in a large company where you've got multiple teams of developers, and you probably end up with people that are making standard images, and they're creating. Back in the day, we used to call it the gold disks. If you're a sysadmin, the gold standard OS and the exact setup that everybody gets. And developers often will create that standard around, if you're a Python or a Node.js developer or a Java developer, you have specific versions that are the official versions that you're supposed to run with the standard packages and all these add-ins that are your team's builds. Those tend to be those base images, right? But there's a lot more to that. And there's environment variable settings, there's custom code, there's custom setups possibly for your editor, and all of that can be thrown into these templates. And then what's really neat is the templates can be stored on a registry. So if you had a corporate enterprise registry like DTR, then you could store all these there. And then developers are essentially able to get these updated templates centrally without any sort of, without getting involved with the desktop deployment teams, right? Like the people that would push new software to your computers. You don't have to involve those people at all. You're just working with the image registries like you normally do. And then the application designer, the GUI in front of that, gives you the ability to spin up new apps very quickly without having to touch the command line. Essentially, in the background, what you're seeing here is it's using Docker Compose to spin all this up and then give you the logs all on the same screen. So you can have that running. You can jump to the command line if you have to, but you don't have to at all the time if you just want to jump into development and get started. So I think I'm excited for what you guys are going to do in the future with this, because there's been a lot of attempts at GUIs, right, for making Docker easier on the desktop. And this is to me, this one is the first real attempt at going end to end, all the way from the creation of templates that store not just a base image, but all the other things you need with that application, storing those in a registry, having a GUI tool that manages more than one container. I think if those of you on the live stream, if you've been around a while and you've seen if you remember, what was the name of the old GUI years ago? Kimatic, right? And Kimatic was neat, but it only dealt with one container at a time. And so when you're talking about application designer and these templates and all that, now you're able to get multi-container with composed templates and all the other stuff that you need with it. So later in the week, we're going to have Docker app, which is kind of the other, you flip this coin over, and this is the other side of that, where you can take these templates and these apps and create that production documentation and YAML that you need to deploy these apps and package it up and do the same thing, push it through your registry, use your registry as not just a place for images, but for all more parts of your software distribution workflow. So it's pretty cool. And then you mentioned the version packs, which if you once you start playing around with version packs, which some of the captains, we've all been able to play with this stuff pretty early, the version packs is really neat, I think, for organizations that are going to end up with many different clusters of container orchestration, right? Because once you start taking container orchestration and putting it in your enterprise, you're going to end up with lots of them, and they're going to be all over the place, and they're going to be different versions. And as much as we'd all love to say, well, isn't it true if you're running Docker and orchestration, it shouldn't matter your versions? Well, your tool version shouldn't matter because most of it's backwards compatible, but a lot of us want to be even more sure. So the cool part with version packs is that basically, like in 5 seconds, you can jump from Docker Enterprise 2 to Docker Enterprise 3, or you can jump to the Community Edition. If maybe you're running servers in production that are on the Community Edition, you can jump between the versions of that. And does it keep the images and stuff in your containers, or no, when you jump packs?
So they are, the images are effectively associated with that version pack.
Okay.
So I switch from like 3.0 to 2.0, I'll see a different set of things.
Oh, okay. So they're exclusive. Yeah, so it's like all your setup is exclusive. All the images and your containers and stuff are exclusive to that version. So that actually makes more sense. But that's very cool. And
just a question, Bret. Yeah, to Ben. So if being an enterprise customer, if I am on 2.1 and I upgrade to 3.0, so if I use the version selection and on my Docker desktop, if I have to use 2 different versions, would that work for 2.1 also, or it would be like 3.0 and higher?
No, so we're doing version packs for all the previous versions. I'm pretty sure I've got a 2.1 version pack somewhere, and I should have loaded some more up. But there's definitely at least a 2.0 version pack. Pretty sure there's a 2.1. But yeah, so version packs are there to work with pretty much any version that is a supported version of Enterprise Engine. We should be doing a version pack for, so you can use it to emulate your production environment, pretty much. As Bret was saying, the goal is to, in theory, these things shouldn't matter too much, but we know you want to be as close to production as possible when you're working locally with containers, in particular with the engine version. So the goal is to give that option to our enterprise customers.
Yeah. Can you talk at all about how can people get this or anything like that?
through your favorite reseller. So drop me a tweet if you're super keen. Have a chat. At the moment, it's only being sold through our enterprise partner network. It's not something that you can just go up to and purchase with a credit card today. We're looking longer term how we can enable more people to get access to these features, but that's not something we've got any dates on yet.
Okay. So if you need it today, then you're going to be, let's see, so either reach out to you on a tweet, or if your company already has Docker Enterprise, which means you already have a relationship with a Docker partner or Docker themselves, then you just reach out to them and say, we want to check out Docker Desktop Enterprise, and they'll help you out. Cool. All right. So there's a lot more to desktop and Desktop Enterprise. We're going to be talking about that through the rest of the week, but this is a great time for you to get in your questions because we have a few minutes left before the hour's up. And I want to make sure that if you got any questions about new features, 1903, especially when it pertains to Docker Desktop Enterprise or to BuildX, anytime any part of the Builder stuff, get those questions in. While we're talking about that, I want to mention I posted a video in YouTube, and I'm not sure if I got it over to Facebook, but there's a YouTube video link that I sent you on Docker Desktop Enterprise 3.0 features. So in case you want a wrap up of that Desktop Enterprise stuff, there's a quick 5-minute little video that explains some, not all, but some of the Desktop Enterprise features that's over on Docker's YouTube channel. So check out that link later in case you missed some of what Ben was showing and you wanted another explanation. The BuildX stuff, again, reminder that is experimental, but experimental doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to make your app buggy, right? So if you're thinking, well, my company can't use anything on experimental or anything that's beta, what I would say about that, because I do get this question about the difference between edge and beta and experimental and all that, but my opinion, and Ben can correct me if I'm wrong here, but on experimental features, what Docker's really saying is we're trying to figure out how you would interface with this thing. Obviously, they're always trying to squash bugs on anything, whether it's beta or stable. But experimental is really about letting you all try it out and see if it's meeting the needs of the customers and getting feedback from you. So if you want someone who's interested in faster, better ways to build images, I definitely recommend you figure out a way to get BuildX and try it. And this is the right time for you to get Docker feedback. How would they get Docker feedback on these beta features? I think Sujay said there was a BuildX repo, right?
Yes. So just to add to that, when we say BuildX is experimental, it's experimental due to the reason that the Windows support is still not mature enough. But on the Linux side, it's fully supported, and you can take your production loads to build against BuildX. Is
there a repo for this?
Yes, if you go docker/github.com/docker/buildx.
All right, github.com/docker/buildx. So that's the command line plugin that you would then put on your system, and then I'm sure it's going to have some information there on how Yep, and in fact, it looks like it's updated. It says if you're going to use it, use Edge, or you can get nightly builds. And then because the thing about a build, right, is if it builds your images and it finishes, chances are like the builder doesn't affect a production image running as a container, right? So the builder is really about the thing that's running on your CI system or on your local machine. So if someone was talking to me and they asked me, would you use BuildX in a real world scenario right now, I would say, well, obviously start with it on your machine. Don't be throwing it on your production CI on day one, but progress slowly like you would with any new technology. But BuildKit this isn't something that they came up with last month. BuildKit and BuildX, the BuildX interface is riding on top of BuildKit, and that's been around years now, right? Like I think the project itself is like 2 years old. Yeah, so it's not a brand new technology. A lot of us have been demoing and showing off BuildKit functionality for over a year now, And in fact, you'll probably find some stuff on these YouTube channels talking about BuildKit from a year ago. So it's exciting to now finally see it in the command line and see it coming to a 1903 release near you. Is the plan for BuildX for it to be out of experimental? I mean, it's not going to be out of experimental anytime in the 1903 release, right? So we're going to have to wait for the next stable release potentially for it to come in a stable.
Yeah, pretty much. So with the experimental features, it's just to temper expectations a tiny bit. Docker won't support experimental features in production, as with all good experimental things. Try not to put them in the production path. I guess mileage may vary.
Right. Mileage may vary in all things, but especially experimental.
Especially experimental. The big bit of experimental as well is that we may change some of the verbiage later on as well with experimental things. So that's probably one of the bigger risks for experimental, but if you script against something that's experimental and we change some of the verbiage or the nomenclature around it, your longer term scripting won't break, which in particular for CIs could be a pain. It'll be, I don't know if we have a date for it coming out of experimental yet, but we'll be working towards it as the parallelization alone and the performance improvement there. We really want to chase after that, and it really is sort of like the future of build.
Cool. All right. You heard it from the horse's mouth. Don't use it in production, even though I told you it might work. Don't call me if it don't work. It works on my machine. I need that little sticker. It works on my machine. So, all right. So I think we have one more thing to talk about, don't we, Ben? That little special surprise for those on the live audience about something that's not yet released?
Not quite. So we've put out a couple of blog posts about it. Docker's been working quite closely with Microsoft around their WSL2. For those who don't know, because it's another acronym, WSL is Windows Subsystem for Linux. The first version, Microsoft is essentially trying to emulate the Linux kernel and link that to the Windows kernel underneath. Just with how Docker works, I know a few of you have probably got it working, but it didn't necessarily give everything we needed to actually really base a whole version of Docker Desktop around it. Things like IP tables and things like that weren't there, so it was really hard for us to interface with. A couple of months ago now, Microsoft announced Windows Subsystem for Linux 2, where they're actually going to be shipping the Linux kernel with Windows. We've been working with Microsoft since they announced that to prep and see if we can get Docker Desktop working with WSL2. Tomorrow, we will be kicking off and sending out links to those who've signed up on beta.docker.com. We'll be sending out links and access to a technical preview of Docker Desktop working with WSL2. Obviously, you have to have the latest build of Windows on the inside of FastStream for that to work. But for those people who are interested, go and sign up. It's really cool. There's some really cool improvements with it. As far as things like boot time, we're down from 45 seconds on Windows for Docker to boot to about 2 seconds. For things like PHP Symfony, we were playing around with some page refreshes. A page refresh on current Docker Desktop, just where it's sort of remember it's taking say 400 milliseconds when using Linux workspaces, which is sort of a feature of WSL2 and Docker. That same page refresh with PHP Symfony is taking about 15 milliseconds. That's down from about 450 to 15. So there's some, and those are sort of just a couple of the really cool things that are coming as part of it. So if you're interested, sign up and we'll get a copy out to you.
Yeah, so that URL is beta.docker.com, and as it has been in the past for all the Docker betas. And if you're, I think the cliff notes of that for me, this is basically a new version of Docker Desktop for Windows only, to take advantage of some new stuff coming in Windows next year. And so this is an early tech preview that uses the tech preview of Windows. So I think some of the requirements are you have to be on the Windows Insider program, and your Windows version has to be on the fast track, I believe, right? On Windows Insider, I think it's 18932 or higher, says Stefan from the Docker Captain's channel. You have to have WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux, and WSL2 enabled inside that tech preview, which is its own blog article probably you could find on Google. And then you need to install the Ubuntu 1804, basically the package, the distro inside your WSL. So if you're a fan of Windows and you've tried WSL, you know about all this, and you would put Ubuntu on there, and then download this tech preview of Docker Desktop for Windows. And I feel like the cliff notes here are way faster boot time of Docker and way faster file system access, right, for large projects.
Yeah, and for people who use things like Linux scripts, you can reuse them. Like it's having that actual Linux kernel there and being able to access it. I doubt it's gonna. Well, it's really cool for people who move between Linux and Windows. It's actually really cool to work with, really nice to work with. Like where certainly my team moves between lots of OSs. They're all excited for it and to play with it.
Yeah, I think in all the stuff that I've seen of it so far, it's the closest we've seen to feeling like your native Linux on using Docker on Windows. It definitely feels like it's almost completely native, and having that shell there and being able to have the files in there and just run your shell scripts instead of having to find a PowerShell script because you're on the different OS. And it's the world isn't all one OS, so until that world exists, this is like the best we've seen it, I think, especially on the Windows side. And I know that Mac people have enjoyed some of the benefits of the Mac OS just being similar to Linux, and the Windows side has had some of those limitations, but I feel like this is pretty great. And so those tech previews are there. This is a long, we're getting this very, very early. So yeah, Ben is stressing here, like this is day one of a tech preview, and that is, way as beyond at least 6 months before we expect the release of this stuff into production Windows. So if you're someone who has to wait for the real release in Windows, check back here after the new year, and we'll probably have some great news about it. But for those of you that love the bleeding edge tech stuff, and I know I run a tech preview of Windows just to see all the neat, cool stuff coming, and sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does work. So your mileage may vary there as well. But I think that's a pretty great thing. It wasn't our release. Wasn't our topic for today, but I thought Ben wanted to sneak it out there for those of you that are willing to stay on the call and watch us live. So, all right, let's check in chat real quick to see if we have any other questions. Let's see. Oh, someone's asking, so you can use build with the current Docker Community Edition? If so, does the registry have to support this kind of push and distinguish the Arch via manifest, or all registries can do that? All modern registries can support the manifest file. I think it was a couple years ago, at least, that the manifest standards came out. It's possibly more than 2 years ago. So yeah, if you're on a recent version of a registry, it should support manifest. I don't know if every single possible registry in the world is, but basically just search your documentation for your registry on that. I don't know if you two have any more information on registry support for manifest, but
Off the top of my head.
yeah, I know when it first came out on Docker Hub,
I think the manifest is being manifest is being adapted in the OCI image format, so all those images, the registry is like OCI compliant, should support it.
Okay. Yeah, check your registry first, basically, on that.
At least the Docker Hub and the Docker Cluster registry works.
Yeah, and the open source registry from Docker's distribution obviously works. Anything that's based on that, which a lot of them are, would work with that. And it doesn't necessarily have to support the new BuildX or Build. Those are just client-side features. The registry really has to just support the manifest file itself and the idea of having multiple images for different architectures of the same image or the same repo. Let's see. Good question. Let me look for another one. Any DCA exam coupons? I have been your course follower. Great. Thank you for buying my courses. I do not have a DCA coupon. That's a great question, but I will ask. So if you ping me on Twitter later, I might have one, but I've never heard that there is such a thing. So I could always ask for you, though. Lots of companies are running Microsoft Windows stuff. I have not really used Windows. That's okay. All right, Quay. Someone's saying they use Quay. I don't know about Quay. Sorry, I don't know if they support the manifest. I would assume so because Quay is one of the leaders. So, but I don't know for sure. So that's scanning the other YouTubes. When you're streaming across 4 channels, there's lots of places to look for questions. We've had a question about is there Docker Desktop for Linux, and then someone else asked, is there any official Docker Desktop release for Ubuntu? And the last I ever heard was no, and Ben's shaking his head no. Sadly, there's no plans for that.
No, not in the near term. Create enough noise, show me that there's enough people that want it.
Yeah.
Keep pestering me, pretty much.
Yeah, there's probably issues around the GitHubs if you look that are requesting that. So just thumbs up all those.
Yep.
Retweet. Go get an online survey going and get people to vote for desktop on Linux. And I think once the support's there in mass, it'll mean a lot to Docker. The Docker team. They'll take that seriously. Like they do all features and requests. Right? It's we need more than one person to ask for it.
Yeah, believe it or not, like you may not always believe it, but I do spend time like going through the GitHub issues, going through the forums, going through Reddit. Like we do read your asks and the things you're talking about. So if there's enough noise and things are floating up, I'll see.
Yeah. Charlie's asking, as he understands it correctly, most of the things shown before the WSL2 announcement were mostly stuff for Docker Enterprise. Okay, so let's clear all this up. The first half of the show where Sujay was showing BuildX and the Build Kit feature set, that is Community Edition. That is available in all versions of Docker. It is experimental still, but it is open source. We showed the repo. It's github.com/docker/buildx, I believe.
BuildX.
Yep. So you can go there now and check it out, get the open source, use it. So no, absolutely. When we started talking about the GUI features in Docker Desktop, so we were talking about version packs, and we were talking about templates and Docker Designer, Application Designer. Sorry, my brain stopped working for a second. Those are all features of Docker Desktop Enterprise, right, Ben? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Desktop Enterprise is adding GUI functionality as well as those version features, as well as a few CLI plugins. And we didn't even talk about them all because there's more that we're going to have on the show tomorrow. We're going to be talking. Let me just go to that. Let me talk about that now while we're wrapping it up. On the show tomorrow, we're going to be talking about fast context switching, which is a new feature across all Docker editions that basically allows you to swap back and forth between environments very quickly with a single command. So you can set up, your Kubernetes cluster, your Swarm cluster, your local command line, a remote Docker engine. All those things can be different contexts, and then you can also do that with Play with Docker. So we're going to have Marcos on the call to talk about that. Talk about how to do that with Play with Docker and what context switching is in general. And then we're going to have David from Docker on, David Yu, and he's going to talk about, I believe, if I get this right, he's going to be talking about Docker Cluster, which is a new desktop enterprise feature that Docker Cluster allows you to build out Docker enterprise clusters from the Docker command line and use templating and basically automation to build out clusters, which is pretty great. It's the future of Docker certified infrastructure, I think, right? That we had a couple years ago, and those of you who've seen that. So think of this as like the penultimate edition of Docker Machine. And that is a Docker enterprise feature. And then on Thursday, we're going to have Michael on the call talking about Docker app, which you've seen him on the call on this show before, talking about Docker app, but now it's been built into the Docker command line. So we're going to be talking about Docker app and all the coolness that's there. We're going to be talking about Docker plugins and how to write your own. It's actually quite easy to do. So you can have your own advanced features on top of the Docker command line. And we're going to talk about Docker rootless mode with Dimitris. And that's really neat too. If you're interested in not running Docker as a daemon, but you want to run it in user space, and you only need those features that user space provides, and you don't want to do it in root, he's going to go through all of that. So come back tomorrow. We're going to be late tomorrow, so tomorrow will not be the same time. It'll be an evening show, so check the times on YouTube. and all of our announcements on Twitter and Facebook that we constantly keep posting. You can also look at those times in the description. If you're on YouTube, you can see that in the description on my channel. And then on Thursday, we will be back here at the same time that we are here today doing this show. Sujay, Ben, thank you so much. Real quick, Sujay, tell us where people can find you on the internet.
On Twitter, mostly. That's my handle on the video right there.
Yeah.
And on Slack also, I'm available.
So, you're talking about the Docker community Slack? Yeah, the Docker community Slack.
Yeah.
And then you have a website, right?
Yes, I do have, but I like to randomly post here and there. So I have website on Medium and then sujay.com. But I randomly post here and there, so it's not a...
Yeah. So you saw a link earlier of his post on Medium. So search him on Medium. Same username as you see on the screen. So, yeah. And Ben, where can people find you?
On Twitter, on the community channel, and if you're posting in either the Docker Foil or the Docker Mac repo with bugs, then I will probably at some point end up looking at something you've posted one way or another.
So you're find me in GitHub issues. No one's ever said that on the show. I'm in GitHub issues. You can follow me there.
Plenty of people appear to. Do vote on things in there. It's a really useful source of information for my team to know what's going on. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, generally Twitter.
Yeah, great. So we're all on Twitter. You can see our handles here. And thank you so much for being on the show, you two. I really appreciate you pulling out the demos and setting up some time to do this. And I'm sure the community appreciates it. Again, we're going to be back here tomorrow. Check the times in the description or on our Twitter. On my Twitter specifically, you can find me constantly talking about it for this week. And we will see you here tomorrow on YouTube and Facebook Live. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.